Have you ever noticed how some people can't just sit with someone else's pain? They hear a problem and immediately jump to solutions. They see someone struggling and their mind races through a mental checklist of fixes, advice, resources, strategies. They can't just be there, they have to do something. And here's what's strange, these aren't uncaring people. In fact, they're often the most caring people you'll meet. They're the ones who stay up late helping friends move, who remember birthdays, who show up when others disappear. They give and give and give. But there's something underneath all that helping that most people never see. Something that looks like love but feels like desperation. Something that appears generous but costs them everything. So what's really happening when you need to fix everyone around you? And why does sitting with someone's pain feel impossible? You see someone you care about struggling, and it's like a switch flips inside you. Your partner is anxious about work, your friend is going through a breakup, your sibling can't figure out their finances, and suddenly you're there, armed with solutions, strategies, articles you've saved, contacts you can connect them with. You present option A, then option B, then option C. You're thinking 3 steps ahead. You've already mapped out the path from their problem to their solution, and you're just waiting for them to follow it. But here's the thing, they don't always want the map. Sometimes they just want it to be heard. And when they don't take your advice, when they keep complaining about the same problem you've already solved for them 5 times, something inside you twists, frustration, resentment, a feeling you'd never admit out loud. If you're not going to help yourself, why should I help you? But you do help, again, because not helping feels worse than the resentment. The psychology behind this runs deeper than simple kindness. Most people who need to fix everyone learned early that their value was tied to their usefulness. Maybe you grew up in a home where someone was always in crisis, a parent who was depressed, anxious, angry, or absent. And you, as a child, learned that the way to earn love, or at least peace, was to make things better, to anticipate needs, to solve problems before they exploded. You became the emotional caretaker before you even knew what that meant. Child development research shows us something crucial. Children are wired to seek attachment, and they'll adapt themselves to whatever gets them closest to their caregivers. If being helpful gets you attention, you become helpful. If fixing things reduces tension in the house, you become a fixer. Dr. Carol McBride's research on childhood emotional neglect reveals that children who grow up managing their parents' emotions often develop what she calls parentified behavior patterns. You learn to read the room before you could read a book. You learn to solve problems before you learn to spell your own name. And here's what's fascinating. That skill probably saved you. It helped you survive a chaotic or emotionally unstable environment. It gave you some sense of control when everything felt uncontrollable. But what helps you survive childhood doesn't always help you thrive in adulthood. Here's the truth that most fixers don't want to hear. Fixing other people isn't really about them, it's about you. When you focus on someone else's problems, you don't have to face your own. When you're busy solving their crisis, you can avoid your own anxiety, your own pain, your own sense of not being enough. Fixing becomes a form of emotional avoidance disguised as love. Psychologists call this codependency, but that term has been so overused it's lost its meaning. What we're really talking about is a nervous system that can't tolerate helplessness, yours or anyone else's. When someone you care about is in pain and you can't fix it, your body goes into threat mode. Your heart rate increases, your thoughts race. You feel this urgent, almost physical need to do something. Because somewhere deep in your nervous system, helplessness equals danger. And this is where it gets complex. You're not actually afraid of their pain. You're afraid of feeling powerless in the face of it, because powerlessness is what you felt as a child when you couldn't fix the unfixable in your own home. Research on attachment theory, particularly the work of Dr. Sue Johnson, shows us that people with anxious attachment styles often become hypervigilant to others' emotional states. They're constantly scanning for distress and constantly trying to regulate it, not because they're naturally more empathetic, but because unregulated distress in others feels like a threat to their own safety. You learned that other people's emotions are your responsibility, that their problems are your emergency, that their healing is your job, But here's what no one told you: it never was. Let's talk about what this pattern actually costs you. First, your relationships become transactional. You give advice, you offer solutions, you fix and fix and fix. And underneath it all, there's this unspoken expectation: if I help you, you'll need me. If you need me, you won't leave. But people can sense when help comes with invisible strings attached, when your care feels conditional on their improvement, when your presence requires their transformation. And ironically, the very thing you're trying to prevent, abandonment, rejection, not being needed, becomes more likely. Because people don't want to be someone's project, they want to be someone's person. Second, you exhaust yourself. Constantly managing other people's emotions is like running a marathon with no finish line. You're always on, always scanning, always ready to jump in and save the day. The term compassion fatigue is usually applied to healthcare workers and therapists, but fixers experience it too. You give and give until you're running on empty, and then you give some more because stopping feels like failing. Third, and this is the one that hurts most, you lose yourself. Because if your identity is built on being helpful, what happens when you're not needed? If your worth is tied to solving problems, who are you when there are no problems to solve? You become afraid of your own rest, suspicious of your own peace, guilty about your own joy when others are struggling. You forget that you're allowed to exist without earning your existence. But here's what's really happening beneath all of this. Fixing is an attempt to control the uncontrollable. You can't control whether people love you. You can't control whether they stay or leave. You can't control whether they'll be okay in this chaotic, unpredictable world. But you can control being useful. You can control having solutions. You can control being the person who helps. And if you're helpful enough, indispensable enough, surely they'll stay. Surely you'll matter. Surely you'll be safe. Except it doesn't work that way. Research on locus of control, the psychological concept of where we believe power resides, shows that people with an external locus of control believe outcomes are determined by external forces. But fixers have something more complex. They believe they should be able to control external forces, specifically other people's well-being. It's an impossible burden. You're trying to be responsible for something you were never meant to control. And the cruel irony is this: the more you try to fix people, the less they develop their own capacity to fix themselves. Your help can become their crutch. Your solutions can become their excuse not to find their own. You think you're building connection, but you might be building dependency. Here's what most fixers have never learned. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone is nothing. Not nothing in the sense of abandonment, nothing in the sense of presence without agenda. Sitting with someone's pain doesn't mean you're passive or uncaring. It means you trust them enough to believe they can handle their own struggle. It means you love them enough to let them feel what they feel without rushing to make it go away. Because here's the truth: pain is not an emergency. Discomfort is not danger. Struggle is not failure. When you constantly rush in to fix, you're sending an unconscious message. I don't think you can handle this. I don't think you're capable. I don't think you're strong enough. But what if they are? What if the solution they need isn't your advice, but your belief in them? Dr. Carl Rogers, one of the founders of humanistic psychology, built his entire therapeutic approach on a radical idea. People have within themselves the resources for growth and healing. The therapist's job isn't to fix or advise or direct. It's to create a space where that inner capacity can emerge. What if that's true in your relationships too? But let's go even deeper, because underneath the need to fix everyone is usually a wound that's never healed. The belief that you, as you are not enough. You weren't enough to fix your parents' depression. You weren't enough to stop the fighting. You weren't enough to make your home feel safe, and you carry that belief into every relationship. You believe that just being present, just being you, without solutions or strategies or six-step plans, isn't valuable. You believe love must be earned through usefulness. And this is where it gets painful. That belief keeps you from ever feeling truly loved. Because even when people appreciate your help, you wonder if they'd still want you around if you stopped helping. Even when people say they care, you question whether they care about you or just what you do for them. You've built an identity around fixing, and now you're trapped inside it. Schema therapy, developed by Dr. Jeffrey Young, talks about conditional schemas, core beliefs about having to meet certain conditions to be worthy of love. For fixers, the condition is usefulness. The schema is, I am lovable only when I'm helping. But here's what you need to hear. That belief is a lie you learned, not a truth you were born with. Let's look at how this plays out in your actual relationships. You're attracted to people who need fixing. The person who's a mess, but has so much potential. The person who's struggling, but would be amazing if they just got their life together. The person who needs you. And at first, it feels good. You have purpose. You have a role. You're needed. But over time, one of two things happens. Either they get better and you panic. Because if they're healthy, if they're whole, if they don't need fixing, do they still need you? So you unconsciously start finding new problems, new ways they're not quite there yet, new reasons they still need your help. Or they don't get better, they keep making the same mistakes, refusing the same advice, staying stuck in the same patterns. And you become resentful, exhausted, bitter about how much you've given and how little has changed. Both outcomes leave you feeling alone. Because here's what you haven't realized. You've never actually let anyone see the real you. The you who's struggling. The you who doesn't have answers. The you who needs help sometimes too. You've been so busy being the fixer that you've made yourself unfixable. So strong that you can't be weak. So together that you can't fall apart. And intimacy, real intimacy, requires vulnerability. It requires being the one who sometimes doesn't know what to do. If you're recognizing yourself in this, you might be feeling something heavy right now. Because changing this pattern requires grieving something you've held on to for a long time. The belief that fixing people will finally make you feel safe. You have to grieve the childhood you didn't have, where adults took care of you instead of the other way around. You have to grieve the fantasy that if you just help enough, love enough, give enough, everyone will be okay and you'll finally be able to rest. You have to grieve the version of yourself who believed that being needed was the same thing as being loved. And that grief is necessary, because you can't heal what you won't feel. You can't release what you won't acknowledge. The pattern of fixing everyone served you once. It helped you survive. It gave you a sense of control in an uncontrollable world. It made you feel valuable when you weren't sure you were. But you're not that child anymore. You don't have to earn your place. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to fix everyone around you to deserve low. So how do you change? How do you stop being the person who needs to fix everyone? It starts with the hardest thing, noticing the urge without acting on it. When someone tells you about a problem, notice how your body responds. Notice the tightness in your chest. Notice how your mind immediately goes to solution mode. Notice the almost physical discomfort of just listening without fixing. And then, just for a moment, don't fix. Just listen. Ask yourself, whose discomfort am I trying to relieve right now? Theirs or mine? Because most of the time, your fixing is about managing your own anxiety, not theirs. Practice saying things like, that sounds really hard, instead of, have you tried? Practice, I believe in you to figure this out, instead of, here's what you should do. Practice the revolutionary act of trusting people with their own lives. And here's what might surprise you. When you stop fixing, some people will step up. They'll find their own solutions. They'll discover their own strength. Because you've finally given them space to do so, others might get frustrated with you. They might accuse you of not caring anymore, of being different, of not being the person they need. And that's information. Because if someone only wants you around when you're fixing them, they don't actually want you. They want a life coach, a therapist, a parent, not a friend, partner, or equal. But here's the part that's even harder than stopping the fixing: learning to receive help yourself. Because if you've spent your whole life being the helper, being on the receiving end feels vulnerable, weak, uncomfortable. You have to practice letting people see you struggle, letting people help you, letting people show up for you in the messy, imperfect ways that you've been showing up for everyone else. You have to practice saying, I don't know, and I need help, and I'm not okay right now. You have to risk being loved, not for what you do, but for who you are. And that's terrifying, because what if you're not enough? What if without the fixing, there's nothing valuable left? But here's the truth, That fear is the wound talking. The real you, the you underneath all the helping and fixing and problem solving, has always been enough. You just never let anyone meet that person. Real change here often requires going back to understand why you took on this role in the first place. Sometimes that means therapy. Sometimes it means really honest conversations with people who knew you as a child. Sometimes it means journaling, reflecting, sitting with memories you've avoided. It means asking yourself, what was I protecting myself from by always focusing on others? Often the answer is your own pain, your own feelings of inadequacy, your own fear that you don't matter, and the only way through is to finally face those things you've been running from your whole life. Attachment-based therapy can be particularly powerful here because it helps you understand how your early relationships shaped your current patterns. Internal family systems therapy can help you understand the part of you that's always fixing and what it's trying to protect you from. But whether you work with a therapist or not, the core work is the same: learning to tolerate helplessness, learning that you can feel powerless without being in danger, learning that other people's pain is not your responsibility to fix, learning that you are not responsible for everyone's happiness except your own. Here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop trying to fix everyone, your relationships often get better, because people finally get to show up for you. They finally get to see you as human. They finally get to be your equal instead of your project. When you stop rescuing people, they get to rescue themselves, and that builds their confidence, their resilience, their sense of agency in ways your fixing never could. When you stop being the answer to everyone's problems, you get to be something better: a witness, a companion, a presence. You get to love people without needing them to change. You get to care about them without needing to control them. You get to show up without needing to save them. And that kind of love, the kind that doesn't require fixing, is actually what most people are hungry for. When you stop fixing and start simply being present, here's what you're really giving people: the message that they're capable, that they're strong enough, that they have what they need inside them already. You're giving them the gift of their own power, and you're giving yourself the gift of rest, of relationships based on genuine connection rather than need, of a life where your worth isn't constantly up for negotiation based on how useful you are. You get to discover who you are when you're not fixing, what you enjoy, what you need, what you feel. You get to discover that you're interesting and valuable and lovable even when you're not solving problems. Maybe especially then. So if you're someone who needs to fix everyone, here's what I want you to hear. You don't have to fix anyone, not your partner, not your parents, not your friends, not your children, not anyone. You are allowed to just love them, messy, imperfect, still figuring it out them. You are allowed to say, I don't know how to help you with that, without it meaning you don't care. You are allowed to have your own problems, your own struggles, your own needs. You are allowed to be imperfect, uncertain, and still worthy of love. You are allowed to stop carrying everyone else's weight and finally put down your own. Because here's the final truth. You were never meant to fix the world. You were never meant to save everyone. You were never meant to have all the answers. You were meant to be human. Beautifully, imperfectly, vulnerably human. And maybe the most healing thing you can do for yourself and for everyone around you is finally allow yourself to be exactly that. Maybe the person who needs fixing most is the one who's been trying to fix everyone else. And maybe the fix isn't more fixing. Maybe it's finally letting yourself rest.